Alright, so let's understand this problem, gameplay analysis 4. Now this is a classic day 1 retention problem and it is widely used in product analytics companies like Atlassian, Microsoft, Meta, Google, Amazon, Uber, everywhere, right? So over here we are given an activity table, right, which stores player login data. Each row over here represents a login event and contains the player ID, that is the unique player, the device ID, that is the device used by the player, and the event date, right? Now our goal is to find the fraction of players who logged in again exactly the next day after their first login, right? So essentially we are calculating day 1 retention. Now let's quickly understand this with an example. So player 1 logs in on March 1st and again on March 2nd. So this player is counted, right? Player 2 logs in only once, so it is not counted. Player 3 logs in on March 2nd and then, much later. So it is also not counted. So out of 3 players, only 1 returns the next day. So the fraction is 1 divided by 3 and that is equal to 0.33. And that is going to be our final output. So maybe let's understand the solution to this step by step now. So first of all, we need to identify the first login date for every player, right? And this is important because everything depends on the first time the player appeared. Now, once we have the first login, we will check, did the player log in again on the very next day, right? So for each player, we take their first login date. Then we look for a record where event date is equal to first login plus 1, right? So in this table, player 1 and the record on March 1 matches with the record on March 2, right? So that means for player 1, this particular condition does exist. For player 2, there is no next day login. Again for player 3, there is no next day login, right? So only player 1 satisfies this condition and that's why they were included in our final output as we saw earlier, right? Now we count all such players who returned the next day, right? And these are called the repeat users. So in this case, repeat users is equal to 1. Next, we count the total number of unique users, right? So from the table, we have 3 players. So total users is equal to 3. Finally, we compute the fraction. So repeat users divided by total users, which gives us 1 divided by 3, that is equal to 0.33, right? So that's it. That's the entire solution. Now maybe let's translate this logic into SQL. So we start with the first CTE called first_logins, right? And here we group the data by player ID and compute the minimum event date for each player, right? And this gives us the first login date for every player. Next, we define another CTE called repeat users. And here we perform a left join between the first logins table, right? That CTE that we have just created, and the activity table, right? Now just focus on the join condition carefully. So over here we match the player ID, which is trivial. And then we ensure that first login is equal to event date minus 1, right? And this condition ensures that b.event date is exactly 1 day after the first login. So if such a row exists, b.player ID is not null, otherwise it will be null, right? So now we use a case statement. If b.player ID is not null, we count the player, otherwise we ignore them, right? And then we wrap this inside count distinct, and this ensures each player is only counted once, even if multiple records exist, right, for the next day. Now at the same time, we also count the total distinct players. So this CTE gives us 2 values, repeat users and total users, right? Now finally, we compute the result. We divide repeat users by total users, and we also cast to decimal to avoid integer division, right? And then we round the result to 2 decimal places, right? And this gives us the final answer. So this is the most optimized solution for this particular problem. And again, as I mentioned before, this is a very important pattern, day 1 retention problem, right? and it is widely asked in product data engineering interviews. So that's it for this particular problem, and now I will see you in the next one.